Before the squint and the six-shooter became a brand, there was a tall kid named Clinton Eastwood Jr. riding out the tailwinds of the Great Depression. He was born in San Francisco in 1930 and spent his childhood watching his family pack up and start over whenever the next paycheck looked a little steadier somewhere else. Those moves finally settled into Piedmont, but the habit of hustling never left. Eastwood's frame filled out early, lean, long, and quiet. But nothing about those years promised Hollywood. He hauled shifts most teenagers wouldn't. Lifeguard in the sun, forest firefighter in the smoke, and steel work that taught him what real weight feels like. Somewhere between those jobs, the idea of performing took hold. Not as a lightning bolt, more as a steady tap on the shoulder. He wasn't the loudest guy in the room. He didn't need to be. That watchful calm, the way he could say more by doing less, began to read as presence. Bit parts followed in the 1950s, the kind of roles that barely pay rent but teach timing, camera distance, and how to keep your nerve when a director wants it again. The transcript paints these years as a slow burn. A young man trained by hard work and lean times to show up, endure, and keep his mouth shut until the moment mattered. When stardom finally found him, it met someone who already knew the value of patience and how to let a look carry a scene. The turn came not with a movie poster, but a TV credit. Rowdy Yates on Rawhide. Week after week from 1959 to 1965, Eastwood rode the grind that makes or breaks an actor. Fast turnarounds, dusty locations, and close-ups that punish fakery. The trail boss taught him economy. Hit the mark. Say less. Let the stare do the heavy lifting. That apprenticeship gave him a toolkit. Timing, restraint, a physical stillness that would soon travel far beyond American living rooms. When the call came from Italy, it sounded unlikely. A lean Western shot on tight budgets from a director named Sergio Leone. Eastwood took the gamble, packed the poncho, and crossed the Atlantic. In a fistful of dollars, 1964, for a few dollars more, 1965, and the good, the bad, and the ugly, 1966, he barely spoke and said everything. The man with no name wasn't the white hat hero of yesterday. He was flinty, laconic, and morally gray. An empty chair you couldn't stop watching. The camera lingered on the silence. Eastwood held it. Those films didn't just raise his profile. They rewired the Western. Dust looked harsher, motives murkier, and the genre's compass suddenly pointed toward ambiguity. Audiences embraced the shift, and Eastwood returned to the States no longer a TV regular, but an international star with a new template for screen masculinity. Spare words, coiled purpose, and a face that could carry a scene the way a soundtrack carries a title card. Back in the States, Eastwood traded the poncho for a badge and found another archetype waiting: Inspector Harry Callahan. In 1971's Dirty Harry, the camera meets a San Francisco cop who doesn't waste words, doesn't apologize, and doesn't mind stepping past the velvet rope of procedure when a killer is loose. The cool of the man with no name hardens into urban steel. Same economy of movement, same unblinking gaze, but now pointed at a city frayed by protest, crime waves, and a national argument over order versus freedom. The famous taunt about feeling lucky wasn't just a catchphrase. It was a cultural Rorschach. Some saw a necessary blunt instrument. Others saw a dangerous invitation to vigilantism. Either way, audiences couldn't look away. Sequels followed, each one sanding the character a little rougher, each one testing where the public drew its lines. Eastwood never played Callahan as a sermon. He played him as a presence. A tilt of the head could register disgust. A slow exhale could read as judgment. That restraint, which he'd trained on Italian backlots and TV soundstages, let the films breathe, even as they rattled the news cycle. By the mid-1970s, Dirty Harry had joined the pantheon of American screen icons, a silhouette you could identify from a block away, a moral stance you could argue about for hours. The role didn't replace the Western anti-hero so much as update it. Horse traded for squad car, frontier traded for fog-bound streets, proving that Eastwood's minimalism could carry the weight of a modern myth. The transcript pivots from star power to stewardship. Eastwood doesn't just act in movies. He arranges the room they happen in. Malpaso Productions is the hinge. By founding his own company, he stops waiting for permission slips and starts choosing stories, crews, and calendars on his terms. The same minimalism that defined his screen presence becomes a working method. Smaller crews, fewer takes, mornings that start on time and wrap early because the shot is found, not wrestled. Then he walks behind the camera. Play Misty for Me. 1971 isn't a vanity detour, it's a signal. The film's clean, unshowy tension announces a director who trusts behavior over bombast. Someone more interested in what a glance betrays than what an explosion explains. From there, the projects widen while the approach stays narrow. Build around character. Keep the lens honest. Let music and silence do as much talking as dialogue. Themes recur. Guilt, justice, redemption, but never as lectures. He frames them like questions and backs away so the audience can answer. The result is a new kind of control that isn't loud or fussy. It's craft as quiet authority. By producing and directing his own material, Eastwood proves he can shape tempo, tone, and moral weather without clutter. The transcript makes it clear. This isn't an actor dabbling in the booth. It's a filmmaker defining a house style. Efficient, unadorned, and confident enough to let the story, not the machinery, carry the weight. The transcript shifts from craft to coronation. Eastwood's evolution behind the camera doesn't just earn respect. It collects the industry's highest prizes. Unforgiven, 1992, feels like a reckoning with every gunslinger he ever played. A Western that strips the romance off violence and leaves the cost. The Academy answers with twin statues, Best Picture and Best Director, and a place in the genre's top tier. A decade later, lightning strikes twice. Million Dollar Baby, 2004, arrives, spare and devastating. Another double win that confirms this isn't an actor dabbling. It's a filmmaker at full command. Between and around those peaks, the range widens without the footprint growing louder. Mystic River, 2003, digs into grief and moral drift like a bruise that won't fade. Letters from Iwo Jima, 2006, stuns by telling a World War II story from the Japanese side with patience and empathy. American Sniper, 2014, and Sully, 2016, translate real lives into tense, unfussy portraits of duty and aftermath. The signature stays the same. Minimal coverage, quick setups, music used like breath rather than brass. He trusts actors to carry the scene and trusts audiences to meet a story halfway. By this point, the legend of one-take Clint is more than lore. It's a philosophy. Efficiency isn't speed for its own sake. It's respect for what matters. The transcript's through line is clear. Eastwood's directing voice, lean, humane, unhurried, becomes as unmistakable as his on-screen stare. And the trophies are simply the proof left on the mantle. The transcript shifts from box office to the kitchen table, where Clint Eastwood's life looked less like a clean arc and more like a knot. In 1953, long before international posters and Oscar nights, he married Maggie Johnson, a poised young model who signed on for lean years and uncertain prospects. For 3 decades, she was the fixed point, while his career accelerated. Public tours, late shoots, a new script always calling. Together, they raised 2 children. Kyle, born 1968, who steered toward jazz bass and composing instead of acting. And Allison, born 1972, who would split her time between performing and directing. The portrait here isn't scandalized so much as frank. Success put Eastwood on roads that rarely looped home. And rumors about other relationships weren't background noise. They were strain made visible. As the 70s wore on, the balancing act failed. The marriage weathered separations and reconciliations until the filings became final in 1984. Reports pegged the settlement between $25 and $30 million, less a headline number than a measurement of time served, shared history, and the scale of a career now impossible to ignore. What the transcript underlines is the contradiction at the center of the Eastwood myth, a fiercely independent artist whose private life kept asking for compromise. The same focus that made him efficient on set could turn remote at home. The same refusal to waste words could register as distance. In the aftermath, he carried forward as he always had, working, composing jazz lines for his films, choosing projects with Malpaso, while the first chapter of his family life closed with a complicated grace. Beyond the studio gates, Eastwood's personal life refused a tidy outline. While still married to Maggie Johnson, he entered a long relationship with dancer-stunt performer Roxanne Tunis, 1959-1973. That bond, half private and half whispered across backlots, brought his first publicly known child outside marriage, Kimber, born in 1964, kept discreet for years as his public image tightened around the strong, silent lead. Then came the deeply visible chapter with Sondra Locke. Beginning in 1975, they lived and worked side by side for nearly 14 years, her presence threaded through his films from The Outlaw Josie Wales to Sudden Impact. The partnership looked seamless on posters but was combustible off-screen. The transcript points to infidelity shadowing the union. During this period, he fathered children with other women, a split between on-screen loyalty and private choices that would ultimately detonate in 1989 with a bitter breakup, lawsuits, and headlines that turned their home into a courtroom stage. One of those parallel relationships, kept quiet at the time, was with flight attendant Jocelyn Reeves. From that secrecy came two children now well known to audiences. Scott, 1986, who built his own acting career, and Catherine, 1988, who moved into writing and occasional performances. Eastwood acknowledged them publicly years later, folding them into a family tree that was already sprawling. After Locke, the pendulum swung to a steadier romance with actress Frances Fisher, professional and personal, welcoming daughter Francesca in 1993. Taken together, these chapters sketch a man whose creative appetite for new stories was mirrored by a restless private life, generous with opportunity, guarded with intimacy, and always moving. For a man who spent a lifetime letting the work talk, Clint Eastwood doesn't hand out compliments lightly. That's why his late-in-life reflection on Robert Redford lands with weight. At 95, he looks back not as a rival or even a peer jockeying for position, but as a survivor of the same long road. He says he admired Redford from a distance, noting a style that never felt borrowed, polished, self-possessed, its own weather system. The transcript frames them as two faces of American screen masculinity. Eastwood's flinty, taciturn grit on one side, Redford's sunlit charm and emotional openness on the other. You wouldn't mistake one for the other, and that, Eastwood admits, was exactly the point. Fans wondered for decades why they never shared a frame. Eastwood answers without drama. Timing never aligned, and neither man was inclined to bend his slate just to force a marquee pairing. They didn't need a co-starring credit to recognize each other's ground. Their paths still ran parallel behind the camera. Eastwood refining a spare, actor-first directing style, while Redford built Sundance into a lifeline for independent voices. Eastwood salutes that legacy with uncharacteristic warmth. It takes vision and it takes guts to create opportunity for others. From this vantage, the tribute feels like gratitude more than gossip. In a town that erodes dignity, Eastwood says Redford kept his. The message is simple and generous. No rivalry, no scorekeeping. Two careers that held their lanes and made the medium better because they did. The transcript draws a clean line between two kinds of American leading man and lets Eastwood acknowledge it without fuss. On one side stands his own silhouette. Dust, silence, the wary half-smile that never quite warms. On the other is Redford, sunstruck, articulate, a charisma that invites you closer instead of daring you to try. They aren't opposites so much as complementary myths, the stoic who carries consequence in his shoulders, and the golden realist whose vulnerability reads as strength. Audiences didn't confuse them, and Eastwood suggests that was the point. You need both faces to tell the country's story. Their resumes rhyme even if their rhythms differ. Eastwood refines a lean, actor-first directing style. Redford builds an ecosystem for other artists, institutionalizing support through Sundance. Each choice reshaped the business from a different angle, one by making streamlined films that trust behavior over spectacle, the other by widening the door for voices that wouldn't otherwise get through. Fans long imagined the joint project that never materialized, but Eastwood shrugs off the "what if?" Schedules never kissed, and neither man bent to force a marquee moment. In the end, the parallel feels more telling than the absence of a team-up. Two careers, two temperaments, moving in adjacent lanes for 6 decades, each validating the other by contrast. Eastwood's take is disarmingly simple. Redford did what only Redford could do, and that was enough. By the time Clint Eastwood reaches for words about Robert Redford, the tone isn't rivalry. It's inventory of years, of choices, of what endures. He isn't measuring box office or trophies. He's looking at how two careers ran side by side without collision. One chiseling out a spare actor-led filmmaking style, the other building an institution that lifted voices from the margins. Eastwood calls out Sundance with unforced admiration. Vision plus backbone. And in doing so tips his hat to a legacy that isn't just filmography, it's infrastructure. He also names the thing Hollywood erodes quickest: dignity. Redford, he says, carried himself with it. A simple compliment that reads like high praise from a man who's seen how easily the business can hollow you out. The imagined team-up becomes a footnote. The real headline is coexistence. They didn't need to share a screen to sharpen each other's outlines. Eastwood's granite minimalism feels more distinct beside Redford's open sunlit warmth, and vice versa. At 95, his perspective softens the lines. No score to settle, no myth to defend. Just acknowledgement that parallel paths can serve the same audience, one by refining the language of restraint, the other by widening the conversation. The transcript leaves us with a clean takeaway. Two artists stayed true to their temperaments, resisted the urge to chase the same lane, and because of that, left the movies better than they found them.